Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. I hope everybody is well. Um, this is a much more somber video. This is a picture of 5-year-old Cannon Hinnant. At least I think that's how you say his last name. He was shot and killed while sitting outside his home riding his bike a few days ago. Let me check the news report. Um, So that happened last weekend in North Carolina on August 9th. On August 9th, this little boy lost his life for absolutely no reason. A man whose name I'm not going to say and whose picture I'm not going to show because I refuse to publicize in any way a cold-blooded killer, came up to this young boy and shot him for absolutely no reason. This little boy will never grow up. He'll never see another sunrise or a sunset. He'll never have another birthday. He'll never go to middle school. He'll never go to college. He'll never graduate high school, get married, have a job, or anything else. His life was cruelly ended in an absolutely senseless way. And the mainstream media, from best I can tell, has not said one damned word about it. And sadly, as many people have stated in their own videos about it, I know Tristan of New That's Nurse Stand has made a video about it. Brandon Tatum, Officer Tatum's made a video about it, I believe. Even Steven Crowder's made a video about this. But to my knowledge, as of yet, no mainstream media, no CNN, right, or anything like that, have made any statements about this boy's death. And sadly, I think it's because of his skin tone. Because of the fact that he was a little white boy and the person who is accused of shooting him is a black man. Race should have absolutely no factor in this case. If the circumstances of the case, because it's still being looked into, right? But if the circumstances of the case more or less remain the same, you have a grown man armed with a deadly weapon walk up to a 5-year-old boy while he's sitting outside on his front lawn in front of his home sitting on a bike, and he's cruelly executed. It's not a race issue. It's a monster killed a little boy issue. But what's going on today in America makes it a race issue. Because we all know that if the races were reversed, that CNN and mainstream news would be all over this. They wouldn't let us hear the end of it. And I hate to say it, but given what we've seen, only certain lives matter to certain people and certain organizations with 3-letter acronyms who are content to stir the seeds of dissension and discord and chaos. This, in my opinion, look, if you're mad about George Floyd, okay, fine, but be mad about this too, because this is just as unjust. A criminal walking up to a kid and shooting him, regardless of the color of his skin, is a crime. It is a brutal crime. It is a crime that oftentimes gets the death penalty. And I looked up North Carolina where this happened, and they do still have the death penalty on the books. And I'm not gonna lie, if the circumstances of this case more or less remain the same, and it is found beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person accused of killing him did kill him, then yeah, I want that person to be on death row. Not only for my own personal outrage, but because if you look at cases, one second, excuse me. If you look at cases where people have received the death penalty, right, it's usually a case like this, right? The execution of a child or abuse in some way, grievous abuse of a kid, right? Usually, there's a certain pattern, and this fits the pattern that I have found, at least when it comes to cases that can lead to a death row conviction. So if the circumstances of the case and the evidence and all that stuff, if the facts for the most part don't change, then yeah, I think that the person who killed him senselessly for no reason, just shot him execution style, should get the death penalty. But the fact of the matter is that the death penalty would still be a cold comfort because execution does not happen quickly in the American courts because of the desire to make sure that you've exhausted every appeal and every option, right? So there's a good chance that even if he was given the death penalty, he would sooner just spend the rest of his life in prison and die in prison before his execution date than he would actually be executed. So regardless of what his prison sentence actually turns out to be, right, this man will still continue to exist. I'm not sure if it'll be live, but he will continue to exist. He will continue to breathe. He will continue to eat food and drink water and waste taxpayers' money. But this 5-year-old boy has met his end. He'll never have another meal. He'll never play with his friends again. He'll never wake up and say hi to his mom and dad. All that, his future, his life, his past, his present, has all been taken from him because of this cold-blooded murder. And the mainstream media remains silent because the mainstream media doesn't care, because the mainstream media only cares when the victim is black. Injustice is injustice is injustice. Injustice doesn't give a damn about your skin tone. This is no different, in my opinion, than the death of Emmett Till, than the death of George Stinney, than the death of Leo Frank, who was Jewish. He was executed by a mob, I think, in the early 1900s because a girl was killed in his factory, and public perception at the time was that he was guilty. He wasn't. But there was a strong anti-Semitic bias in American society at large at that time. So Mr. Frank was beaten to death by the mob, right? And sadly, I think, and I hate to say it, but I think that this young boy, who will never see the light of day again, he's going to end up like Leo Frank and George Stinney and Emmett Till and others. He'll receive justice decades later, right? There'll be someone, right? Either me as an old woman, or who knows, maybe my brother will have kids and whatnot, right? But there'll be somebody at some point, 50 years down the future, and they'll make a video and they'll go, oh, at some point in 2072 or whatever, this young boy was finally given the justice he deserved. We shouldn't have to wait a lifetime for this little man, this little boy, to receive justice in his case. So for whatever it's worth, I hope that justice comes sooner rather than later for him, as it should have in the cases that I mentioned. But sadly, I think it won't, because just like there was public bias, general societal bias against these innocent victims because of the color of their skin, I think sadly we're seeing and experiencing the same thing here. General silence from the people who should be speaking up the most because he's a white little boy and the person who killed him was a black man. If you care, if Black Lives Matter, then this little boy's life matters too. All of our lives matter. This never should have happened. And what's worse is that I fear that justice will not be had because our society is going backwards. And sadly, I fear that, again, just like there was bias against blacks in the cases of George Stinney and Emmett Till, just like there was a bias against Jews again in the case of Leo Frank, there's a negative bias against whites, and that is what's going to hold up any sort of justice for this young boy. I hope and pray I'm wrong, but I sincerely think I'm not. And it's a tragedy and it's a travesty. It reminds me of the song Savages from Pocahontas, right? Where the Indians and the settlers are demonizing each other, right? How does that song go? This is as we feared, the pale face is a demon. That's what we're doing now in our society. We are demonizing white people. Not just angry at cops who happen to be white, right? But now we're just demonizing white people. It's not right. It wasn't right when American society demonized blacks. It wasn't right when American society demonized Jews. It wasn't right when we demonized Asians. In particular, the Chinese and the Japanese during World War II. It wasn't right when we demonized the Irish and the Italians when they came to America. It was never right. Never right. We're supposed to learn from those dark periods in our history, not repeat them. And sadly, we are repeating them because we are allowing collectively as a society our anger at injustice to make us unjust, right? Beware that when you look into the abyss, because the abyss looks back at you, we are experiencing that. And the mainstream media that's supposed to keep people informed, is supposed to speak for the little guy, says nothing for the little guy, for this little boy. All I can do is hope and pray that justice will be served in this young boy's behalf and pray for his family because no matter what happens, they've lost their son. And there is nothing that the law can do to undo that loss or to ease that pain. So, yeah, that's all I've got to say about that. There's really not much more that can be said. So yeah, have a good night, and especially if you have kids or kids are in your life, maybe you have nieces, nephews, give them a hug and a kiss because you never know what could happen next. See you around.